Okay, Dr. Ruckman, Jacob the man had his name changed to Israel. But from that time on, the Jewish people are sometimes called Jacob and sometimes Israel. Could you explain the difference, distinction there, the reason for it, etc.?
No, I don't know if I could. I'll show you what's behind it. Come to Genesis, if they're called by two different names, the reason for it is to call attention to their characteristic as a nation. And the characteristic of a nation in one case would be bad, and the other case would be good. And this comes from back in Genesis. And come to Genesis and pick up Genesis chapter 32. Genesis 32. If they're called this alternately, you'd have to look at the context to see why they're being called this alternately. But if they're called this alternately, it's because the Lord's emphasizing their bad aspects and the good aspects. It's like Peter is called Simon Peter. The word Simon means shifting sand. The word Peter means a rock. There's a difference between shifting sand and a rock. When Simon Peter writes his epistle, in the first epistle, he says, Simon Peter, an apostle, or Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. In his second epistle, he says, Simon Peter, a servant. Which means that when he writes his first epistle, he's aware of the fact that he's the solid rock and the apostle and the strong man in Christ. But a few years later, after he's had time to grow in grace, he recognized the old man is still with him. So he says, Simon Peter, a servant, instead of an apostle. That's what you got in the case of Jacob. Genesis 32, verse 27. Genesis 32, 27. What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said to him, thy name shall be called no more Jacob. The word Jacob means supplanter, poacher, trespasser. But Israel. Israel means a prince with God. Yisra, Prince El, a prince of God. As a princess thy power with God. So if the Lord changes those terms anyplace else in the Bible, then in the context, if he says Jacob, it'll have to be a reference to the human man who was weak and frail. And if he says Israel, it'll have to be a reference to as chosen and as powerful and as a prince of God. And the context would have to tell you why the Lord chose that. I wouldn't have time to run all the references on it right now. That's probably more than 100. The context would have to show you. Something else.
Nothing like a Bible to clear up a college education.